The weaponization of mental health, a paradox. With great relief and joy I read about Britney Spears' father intending to step down as conservator of her estate. As a mental health professional and die-hard Britney stan, the whole conservatorship business with her father has always given me bad ick vibes. Recent developments on the #FreeBritney front shook loose a few opinions I have about the weaponization of mental health. Britney's conservatorship serves as a rich example of a manner in which the state of one's mental health can be systematically used against you. This rather concise article by Billboard chronicles the various events that led up to the Free Britney movement, but for the purpose of my arguments, I'll start with a brief summary of said events. In 2007 Britney's judgment was impeded and she made some serious mistakes. For the last 13 years Britney's opportunistic dementor of a father, Jamie Spears, has been, allegedly, exploiting these mistakes in order to maintain a diabolical and unrelenting control over her fortune in the form of conservatorship. In fact, it has now come to light that in 2008 the courts placed Britney under conservatorship without giving her any notice of the fact, despite that no doctor has ever provided evidence or declaration that she is incapacitated. Luckily Sis got herself a new team of squirrel friends, and they're getting ready to come for Jamie, as they should. The circumstances surrounding Britney Spears' conservatorship arguably presents an example of how one's mental health can be weaponized for the personal gain of others. This is not a new concept, and the weaponization of mental health has gone beyond mere individual-level stigma. Mental health weaponization has been normalized in the way we speak about certain groups of people. It is used in divisive political rhetoric to cause division, dehumanize and justify violence. It is even argued to be institutionalized through formal policy in organizations such as the U.S. military in an effort to avoid liability and circumvent the need to properly address mental health, which of course would require assigning adequate resources. Can you pay my bills? Can you pay my therapist bill? They probably can, but the receipts show that they don't want to. All of this is done to deliberately and systematically penalizes one group to the benefit of another. Conversely, events in recent years have also presented examples of deliberate attempts to use mental health as protection. In 2015 Dylan Roof committed the infamous Charleston church shooting by entering Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina and opening fire on church members attending Bible study. A forensic psychiatrist found Roof fit to stand trial, but nevertheless part of his attorney's defense argument was that he is mentally ill and thus not in control of his actions. This mess gets even messier, but since this tragic event is only an illustrative example, I'm leaving it at that. Google for more at your own peril. Similarly, in 2017 James Fields Jr. intentionally drove his car into a group of anti-racism protesters in Charlottesville, Virginia, injuring 19 people and killing Heather Heyer. Fields was charged with 30 federal hate crimes. At both filing and during a subsequent brokering of a plea deal, the public defender cited Fields' traumatic childhood and his mental illness in their argument for a lighter sentence. Do not get me wrong, as a mental health professional myself, I am not challenging the decision to intervene in Britney's life after the events in 2007, nor do I doubt that individuals such as Dylan Roof and James Fields are indeed deeply troubled. If we consider these events collectively at a societal level, however, what concerns me is the seemingly paradoxical manner in which we appear to deploy mental health as both offensive and defensive weapons to achieve specific outcomes, like using the same instrument as both a sword and a shield. For some, like Britney, with mental health conditions, any agency over their lives are taken away. Certain professionals like military personnel, pilots, police officers struggling with mental health issues, they risk ruining their entire career if they were to disclose their condition to the wrong person. Yet the guys who committed premeditated murder require special consideration and care because of the state of their mental health? The woven, golden thread that runs through all of these dumpster fires of human existence is the fact that someone uses the mental health of another to achieve a desired outcome that is not the mental well-being of the individual. This someone then makes a decision as to how they will weaponize another's mental health. One could argue that it is not the someone, but rather the context which dictates in what ways a person's mental health can be weaponized. I would argue, however, that the same mental health condition, of the same person, in the same situation, can be used as both offensive and defensive weapons regardless of the context. Let me again refer to my examples to illustrate this point. Jamie Spears wants control of that Vegas coin Britney is raking in and uses her alleged 2007 meltdown as a sword to get it. Yes, I am aware that Jamie is claiming he is acting in his daughter's best interest, but as recent events have shown, the only interest he has been acting in is his own. Thus, I argue that if he was acting in Britney's best interest, he could have opted for a shield approach to protect his very rich and very famous daughter from opportunists by structuring the court-ordered conservatorship at the time more like a trust which appoints impartial trustees who make regular assessments and amend the conservatorship conditions as opposed to only him calling the shots. I am not a legal expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I am 99.9% sure there were alternatives to Britney's conservatorship structure. In the case of the mentally ill neo-Nazis, the prosecution could have used their mental health conditions as swords to strengthen their respective cases and argue that the defendants' conditions are chronic, that they remain a danger to society and thus must receive the maximum sentence, as opposed to the defense teams opting to use their clients' conditions as shields, by arguing their relevancy as mitigating/extenuating circumstances. Which brings me to my main point: so what? Why should we care about the paradoxical nature of the weaponization of mental health? The first and most obvious answer to that question is the risk of exploitation. I mentioned that one of the strings that make up the golden thread that runs through all of these examples is the attempt at achieving a desired outcome that is not the mental well-being of the individual. I argue that in the examples used, either an individual or a system and #40, legal systems, organizational structures, etc. and #41, is being exploited when weaponizing mental health, and in the words of Counselor Mackey, exploitation's bad MK. Secondly, I'm not one to throw around wild allegations. Read, I am very much one to throw around wild allegations, but I am quite wary of the racialized and gendered patterns that appear to emerge from the weaponization of mental health. I do not have empirical data to support this claim, however theoretical and anecdotal evidence does appear to suggest that offensive, sword weaponization is more frequently used against women and people of color, while defensive, shield approaches are more frequently for men and white people. Lastly, the seemingly inherent paradox of weaponizing mental health sheds light on how society still views mental health. Despite many decades of scholars, practitioners and special interest groups trying to destigmatize mental health and mental health challenges, we still appear to associate mental illness with weakness, deficiency, shame, or risk, to name a few. Therefore, we need to take away these underpinning mechanisms that allow for the weaponization of mental health. If, as a society, we want to take away the opportunity for exploitation, if we want a more equal and just society, the responsibility lies with each of us to educate ourselves about the impact of poor mental health, to show empathy towards those experiencing challenges to their mental health, to refrain from judgment of those brave enough to disclose their mental health conditions, and to collectively destigmatize mental health, which will make it systematically harder and harder to weaponize.